Hey everyone, welcome to Watch It Paint It. If you're listening carefully, you might have noticed that this isn't Ben.
Or is it?
I'm Ben's wife, Catherine. Today's model is Wampa from Star Wars Imperial Assault.
100% Wampa.
And the reason I'm here is because Ben reckons that painting models is an easy hobby to get into. And he thinks that anyone could paint this particular model and get a good result. I've got no experience and pretty crappy artistic ability. So we thought that if I could have a go at doing this model with Ben instructing me, then it would show the sort of result that you could get as a novice painter.
Did you say crappy? Because I think that's probably going to get me demonetized on YouTube.
You're not so crappy. So let's get started. But I'm going to pass over to Ben to the commentary now because he's the expert.
We're going to be starting with priming. We're going to go outside because we don't want to get paint all over our house. We're going to put the little guy, the little Wampa, on a bit of card so we can rotate it easily. And then we're going to be using Army Painter's colour primer, but this is just matte white. Give it a good shake for 2 minutes or so. Really work those arms. Then we're going to be putting this model on some cards so it doesn't go everywhere. And basically, I put the model at the distance from that flap just to keep the can 20 centimeters away, about the distance you want to be spraying at. And then we're going to be making light sprays, left to right, right to left, back and forth, building up the primer. You're not trying to get too much on it, and we're just being very careful. Always start spraying with the can to one side in case it splurts. Once you finish priming, turn that can upside down and run it until it runs clear and no more paint comes out. That's going to keep your nozzle nice and clear. Here, Catherine's just showing you how the little fella looks after priming. So we decided, looking at the artwork and looking at where the Wampa lives, etc., we would like this guy to look a little bit bluey, a little bit frosty. So Catherine's mixing up a wash here. That was Army Painter's blue tone. And then we're using those dropper bottles that we got, those empty dropper bottles. I keep watering some of them. And this is about a mix ratio 1-to-1. It was about 5 drops of the blue, 5 drops of water. You know, just keep the ratio even and you can get about this look and feel by the end. Now, having done it, and you are going to see in a moment that this guy comes out looking pretty blue by the end of this stage, and even watered down, it was just the blue ink is incredibly strong. So maybe water it down even more, but if you just don't like it looking blue, there's plenty of other washes available. You can go for a sort of more yellow tone or a brown tone. And that is him completely washed.
And I admit I was doubting Ben at this point because he was looking very blue.
He's just a bit chilly. He's just got a bit of frost on his fur. So next up, Catherine's going to be mixing up a colour to dry brush. We're going to be using Army Painter's, what's it called? Crushed Skull. I remember all the names. And mixed in with a little bit of light denim. And that is far too little.
Yeah, this took some time.
So Catherine's going to mix in more and more. And I'm just showing you this step. If you would like him to look slightly pale blue, this is the sort of next step you would like to go for. What we found is because of how blue our Wampa turned out to be, off camera, we did lots and lots more dry brushing. I say we, I just sat behind Catherine cracking the whip. She got repetitive strain injury on her wrist from probably 20 minutes of dry brushing this particular colour.
It did take longer than Ben told me.
And then, so with that in mind, we just switched down to just Crushed Skull. So there was no blue mixed in. So it's up to you if you want to do that, but you're going to see us painting this part with Crushed Skull and a smidge, 10% say, of light denim, just a slightly bluey grey. And then off camera, the continuation of the dry brushing, you guys don't need to see 20 minutes of this. Off camera, it will just be Crushed Skull. So when it comes back onto camera, it's going to look a little bit more, what would you say, ivory, beigey, creamy. And so how do you find the washing step, Catherine?
The washing I really like. That was a nice, easy bit, nice and quick. This took more time, but it was still easy.
Yeah, I think that's one of these key points is why I picked the model. Now, having picked this model, it is a bit tricky in the way that it's white. Now, don't get me wrong, white is one of the most difficult colours in miniature painting to paint. So although the model's easy and the techniques we're going to use is easy, Catherine was at a disadvantage with white being difficult. I think maybe yellow would have been more difficult because at least white goes on easily. It's just difficult to get the contrast looking realistic and such. Talking of this specific model, I would like to say thank you ever so much to Rule, a Patreon supporter who actually, I don't have this game, Star Wars Imperial Assault, and he just posted me over a handful, I think it was the entire Hoth expansion. So big shout out to him. Thank you very much for supporting the channel and making these models available for people to watch these tutorials of. And also, just in case you're unaware, on Patreon we do have votes, and we voted on which model to paint of the Hoth expansion, and this was actually the runner-up, which is why I'm letting Catherine do it. I will be doing the winner chicken dinner of that vote later on in the month. But yeah, by all means, check out Patreon, come and join the community, get involved in the voting, and get involved in where the channel's going to go with itself and what we're going to paint and what we're going to talk about. We're back to the painting now, and Catherine's going to be doing another level of dry brushing. She's just going to be using Army Painter's matte white, and this time you want to be going a lot lighter strokes. A little bit heavy on that knee there, but it's not going to matter too much. I've instructed her, she wants to highlight the most raised parts, the standout parts. So it was his face, his right thigh, a little bit of his left knee. He's got this sort of beardy hair look around his face, which sticks out further than the rest of his torso. Also getting a little bit on his tail, and then it's going to be the back of his left calf. Well, calves are on the back, but the back of his left leg, his calf. You are going to just want to highlight the bits that you would like to pop most. His hands would also be a nice point as well. Next, Catherine's taking Boney Spikes by the Army Painter. This is a sort of yellowy, beigey skin tone. It's sort of the fallback one I do a lot of the time when it's an animal colour. It's very similar to the colour I used on the owl bear that I painted previously. And this is just going to be using a detail brush. So this is Redgrass Games detail brush, but any smallish brush. It's quite a large model, so you're not going to struggle too much. But Catherine's steadiness is semi-lacking, so we went for a smaller brush to give her less room to miss.
I was getting better at this point at holding the model and holding the brush. I was very shaky at the start. I think that is a skill that you do pick up, and yeah, I didn't realise how hard that bit was.
Holding is definitely difficult, and I was advising Catherine at this point to really lean her wrists into the desk and sort of put her hands together, and that was really helping steady her hands up, as well as using a hobby holder here, which is giving her much more to grip than the tiny flimsy base would be doing. Here she's using Necromancer Cloak, and this is for his toenails, his fingernails. He's also got a horn on each side of his face. Catherine's just going to show you doing the right hand side, because you guys, he's pretty symmetrical. You need to do the same on the left hand side, but as mentioned at the start of the video, this is basically her first ever miniature, and the camera does not help anybody paint. If you are just new to painting and you're picking it up, I advise not doing it behind a camera. You'll have a much easier and better experience. But she did what she could for the channel and painted the other half off camera. So there you can see all of that Boney Spikes and Skeleton Bone in its full glory. It wasn't Skeleton Bone, it was Necromancer Cloak. But we could have used Skeleton Bone for the skin as well. Next is going to be Toxic Boils. It's just a pinky purple, and this is just for his tongue, nothing else. Just while I'm looking at his face, you can also see that skeleton bone. I keep saying skeleton bone. That Boney Spikes was applied to his sort of lips and just under his eyes, if you can be gentle enough, and the tip of his nose too. And Necromancer Cloak were just for his eyes. He's got quite big eyeballs. That's quite easy to do, but not with a camera in the way. Light tone is going to be used, the wash for his tongue, and the what do you call the bits of your feet? What's that called? The soles. The soles of his feet and the palms of his hands, and that's just going to give that some detail. Bring that detail back through. It's going to show his the
creases.
The creases. Catherine's I'm instructing to which bit I mean off camera. Then we're going to be using Filthy Necromancer. Again, mentioning Patreon. This was voted for on Patreon, discussed on Patreon, what we should call this mixture. This is Filthy Sue Necromancer Cloak mixed 50-50. We had a vote on Patreon. We've decided Filthy Necromancer from now on. You're going to see that on the channel a lot. It's one of my go-to mixers on highlighting Necromancer Cloak, just lightening that up. And Catherine's going to be using that detail brush again and just dotting on some details down the center of all of his nails, and on those horns it's got those raised bits. I don't know what you call it. It's like a spirally horn, and you want to paint the centermost raised bit of each spiral. For the base, she's just going to be using light denim by the Army Paint. It's just a light blue, and that's because we're going to be Catherine's going big, go home at the moment. I would often now just be painting the base black, but I'm going to help Catherine do a proper base on this miniature. So we're starting with a light denim on that base, and that's just going to give a bluey, icy look to just begin with. We're going to be covering up most of that, so hopefully you won't see any of it anyway. So we're going to be using some super glue. This is Army painted super glue. It's got a nice long spout for better control and accuracy for where you're aiming. This is just a piece of plastic that broke off my chair, so we're going to be sticking that on the base.
Recycling.
I know, guys, when you come into basing just bits of anything, it depends what you're doing with it. We're going to be covering this in snow, so you're not really going to see what that is. It's as good as a rock, or I don't know much about Hoth. Does it have little metal bases hidden around? Maybe he's just found a bit of crashed ship or something. On the other side, this is a rock Sophie collected for me and just deposited on my desk, and it's been there for about 6 months. So putting this to use now. Catherine's just very carefully placing that. If you do have tweezers, which if you've been watching the channel for a while, you'll know I do not have tweezers. So using Catherine's much slimmer fingers, and you'll see it goes on a lot easier than when you watch me do that. Now, you do want to be careful not to get any super glue on your fingers, because that does stick almost instantly and it's not pleasant. So do be careful if you're following along with this bit. And then these are just some bits of sort of charcoal. It's like a charred basing effect supplied by Gatehouse Gaming UK. And I've not used this on a base by itself yet, but I just thought I'd try this out and see how well these stick. And the answer is they stick very well. And if you wanted a sort of charred base look, a pile of this would look pretty sweet. But again, we're just building up the underneath of a base here to apply a shed load of a Santa sleigh load of snow on top of this in a moment. So we're just giving it something exciting to build upon. And then one last rock on top of that plastic, just to make it look more realistic. Things pile up randomly, don't they? So there we go. Obviously, guys, stick whatever you'd like and as little as you like on the base. Off camera, I just applied some of this straw tufts that I had. I thought that looks quite dead. And we're going to try again, covering it in snow, painting it a little bit in white. But that was my contribution to this model.
I like it.
A little add-on, a little touch, make it look a little bit more random and realistic. So next up is it's basically PVA glue, and this is Army Painter's basing glue. We're just applying that generously all over the base, and then Catherine's spreading this round to get a decent coverage. Now, I think with the snow that we're going to be adding, you could actually leave huge blobs of this, and it's just going to collect up more snow and make it look a bit more like a snowdrift. And we'll do that off camera after the initial coating of this snow, just showing you how to go about doing it. But you basically want to cover the entire base in glue. Then you're going to need to detach it from the hobby holder,
which I couldn't do initially.
Catherine, unaware of how screw caps work, it's difficult living in our household. Next is Army Painter's snow, and unfortunately I haven't got much left, so we're being ultra careful with this and just applying it, gently shaking it over the top. Normally I would take the model off entirely and just stick it in the snow and then shuffle it around a little bit until it's covered, but it wasn't deep enough to do that, so we're going to have to go for a bit of pouring. But you just basically want to fill that up, be excessive, because I'm pouring it on top of the lid anyway, so any that falls off, any that excess we have, we are going to be able to collect back up at the end. So you just want to make sure you've covered all that glue, and all that glue is not going to waste, and you're getting everywhere you would like. Once that's covered, which taking a while, and Catherine's worrying about her fingers. But once that's covered, you're going to want to pick up the little guy and tap him off. So I'd normally just tap this straight back off into the box, but we'll do it on the lid so you guys can all see very easily. But yeah, basically you're just tapping off anything that hasn't stuck, anything that's not glued on, you're just relieving from the model. And then off camera, as I mentioned, we did a few more coats, built up some huge blobs to get a bit more of a snowdrift feel, but that's it. That's the guy completely finished. Now, checking back on the footage, there was 40 minutes of video footage, and I'd say there was probably 30 minutes maximum off camera. So you're talking about an hour and 10 minutes for the model from completely start to finish by an amateur who's not painted before. So I think that's absolutely fantastic. What a great model to start with. Why is very, very tricky. Hopefully you enjoyed seeing this process, and if you've never painted before, hopefully you managed to see it was pretty easy. It wasn't not too difficult, and it's a hobby that people can easily get into.
I'm quite impressed with how it's turned out, actually. It's better than I thought it would be, and I really liked how some of the good effects that you can get are actually quite quick and easy to achieve, like with the palms, the wash that we put on that, it showed up some nice detail.
Yeah. washing is great for adding detail and just getting a quick, good look for a miniature. Thank you all ever so much for watching. Thank you, Catherine, for doing the painting. Thank you, Rule, for sending in the model. And thank you to all the patrons for helping vote and determine what we do on the channel. If you've not checked out Patreon, please do so in the future. Thank you all very much for watching. I'll see you again next week.